Yeah, I want to announce Anandan Geethan. He is a colleague and friend from Chennai, India. We have been colleagues as psychotherapists and teachers in the TA field. And we met in UK, in Oxford, some years ago in a seminar. And we dialogued on the development of organizational orientation and going beyond personal orientation. And on many levels, this means a change. And we wrote down these dialogues, and there's a volume out. One is already out, and volume 2 is on the way. And the label Geethan found for his kind of work with big companies was interdepartmental work. So really to help those who have to cooperate every day to do that better. And he has designs, approaches and experiences on that. And he agreed to come here, it's a long way from India, and to tell us what his experiences in Chennai and other towns or cities in India are with that. Please come here.
I don't know what to say, whether it is a good afternoon or a good evening, because as per Indian time, it must be late evening, but in a German time, it is afternoon. So whatever it is, it's a happy afternoon. My name is Geethan, and I am from India, Chennai. I run this organization, Nibbana. Nibbana means liberated from past conditioning. It's a word in Pali, language Pali, the word used by Buddha himself. So I'm basically a psychotherapist from transaction analysis background. Though I was working with individuals and families, I also believed that since I work with people, I can work with organizations also. I was a good trainer too. But then I was finding it, how much ever I work with organization, though I get good programs, but I didn't know whether the change was happening. Because after the training program, what happened was always a question for me. And I went in search of it to find that there was not much of transformation happening through training. So I was in search of it, and that's where I met Bernd Schmidt in 2011. And I know intuitively I can learn something from him. And we started our journey from then. And I think it's quite a good journey. So I have written this first volume of how he taught me to be an organizational-oriented consultant. So we recorded that experience, and we made it as a first volume. And the second volume will be on how do we apply certain models of his, and now how I have expanded those models to fit into my Indian context. So this is me. And so what I'm going to be talking today is about, the next slide. So these are the areas I'll be covering today. The significance of interdepartmental coordination and how that is connected with OD. And what are the principles which is operating behind this interdepartmental coordination work. And a model which I use to explain how I work, and how do we despair competently. This is one of the terms of Bernd Schmidt, and he has a model on dilemma circle, where how you can despair competently, because we need to cross that space for the interdepartmental coordination to sustain itself. And then what are the tangible results we got? A glimpse of that I will be sharing. So what I see is the organization development has to be a part of day-to-day function itself. It cannot be a private process or a separate process. And a HR department or a learning development department or the external organizational consultant alone cannot create this kind of a work. It has to be in the agenda of every department and the leadership also. So this is one of the key perspectives we carry Though we don't talk about it, because if you say this, most of the time we don't get an entry in the organization. Because then they find it difficult to understand what do we mean by this. But this is the perspective I carry when I initiate an interdepartmental coordination. So I was looking for what is that which makes the difference in the interdepartmental coordination work which we do in our place. So there are, first I see what is an organization as it's a complex network. When I go to organization, we hear terms like market, leaders, profitability. You hear so many terms, stakeholders. Then if I'm an OD consultant, I really don't know where to start my work. And sometimes even organization doesn't know where to start their work. So one area where we can start our work is interdepartmental coordination. And it's like a leverage point, because if you define an organization as a system, as many parts working together, and these parts are departments. And it's like one thread you pull, which connects with various other threads, like profitability, productivity, creativity, managing the market. Many things are connected with the departments together. So this is one of the key leverage points where we can start. Not necessary to even study a climate in the organization. We can just start with how an interdepartmental function happens together in an organization, and through that, an organization development can be made. So this is one of the key perspectives about interdepartmental coordination. And I would like to share how this came into my realization. Though I was training in a dairy industry, and there were people who were participating from various factories, but they were not from the same factories, but they were from different factories, but all belonged to the same organization. So one was a production man, another was a quality assurance man, another was a marketing person. And when they were discussing, they told me that usually when the market is asking for some samples, the production people delay, and that's the reason we are not able to capture new market. Then the production people said, we are willing to do, but the quality assurance people do not support us. Then I asked them, okay, from the market, when do you get this requirement that you need the sample? They say at least 2 days in advance. Do you inform the quality department that this information has come? They said, no, we have to wait till the product is ready, the sample is ready. I asked, what will happen if you inform the quality people? And there was one more quality person there, and he said, if they have informed, we will be working with them in different intervals. And maybe we will allot a space so that we can cater to the market emergency. That gave me a flash that, okay, this interdepartmental coordination makes a difference in the organization. So I presented the same example to the MD of the organization, and he said, yes, this is what I want. Otherwise, when I was talking to him about culture, system change, he didn't understand what I'm talking about. But when I talked about interdepartmental coordination, the MD of the organization immediately understood. And he intuitively knows that is what he wants for his organization. And that is where this interdepartmental coordination became a method, or one of the approach what I do in organizations. So there are 3 things which I look for in an organization is about when we do interdepartmental coordination, the 3 principles. And I also searched in my own culture of do we have a space in our own Indian culture for all these things? Because if we can search for it, then maybe we will have a better strength in implementing it. So the 3 principles, which is dialogic, another is culture, and systemic. So these are the 3 principles we take into account. Now, what do we mean by dialogic? I'll start from there. So the dialogic process here is about every individual is creating an experience through their own perception. That is my understanding, because through our perception, we create a meaning for our own self. Now, this is from the individual experience. But in an organization, it's a social experience. So this perception has to be somehow translated Now, how do we do that? It is through the dialogical process. And what is the mindset we need to carry for a dialogical process? That was my thinking. And I found some significant principle in India, particularly from the religion of Hinduism, which I'll be talking little, not too much into detail, is one about Advaita. Dvaitam means duality, polarities. Advaitam means non-dual, non-duality. Somewhere this is giving me an idea that if you have to have a dialogical process, then you need to have a non-dual mindset. Not get fixated about this is how it has to be. Willing to move from one polarity to another polarity, coming to the middle, sometimes letting go of the polarity to choose another polarity, and I think that is a mindset we need to have. And this Advaitam was given maybe some few thousand years back by Adi Shankara, which I will give some small history about, one of a Hindu saint in India. And then systemic, yes, if organization is system, which we all agree, and systemic is how these parts function together. That's how I see systemic. System is how many parts create a whole, and for me systemic is how these parts are interacting. And the culture, one of the sentence of Byrne about culture is network of habit. I add one more sentence to it, is culture is a network of habits based on clarified and unclarified assumptions. There are many assumptions which are not clarified. So we need to have a culture to clarify our own assumptions, and that is dialogical process. So these are the three principles which we keep in mind when we are doing this interdepartmental coordination. So let me give you some orientation about what I found in my own culture about dialogical process. You could see this person who's sitting here with the hands. He is called as Adi Shankara. His name is Shankaran. And the person who is pointing the finger is called Mandan Misra. What is unique about these two people? They had a dialogical process, a debate for a very long time. Can you guess how long these two people would have debated together? Any guess? Whatever comes to your mind.
1,000 years.
No, not so much. Certainly not so much. They debated for 6 months. Now, here I had a question from your name, Michael. He said, one of the CEO told, we don't have so much of time for dialogical in organizations. Certainly not, but we will come to another perspective also. Now, Mandan Misra was a strong ritualist. For him, everything has to be in a particular way. So he was more dogmatic. And Adi Shankar was non-dual, so he was flexible. So Mandan Misra was telling, this is how it has to be done. And Adi Shankara was giving different perspectives to it. This is where the dialogical process was happening. And they need a referee, a judge, to tell whether they are working in a proper way. And who has to judge that who is winning here? So they need a referee. So Adi Shankar said, you can choose your own referee to Mandan Misra. And Mandan Misra's wife, Bharati, she became the judge, a referee between them. So as the dialogical process continued with them, at one point, Bharati announced that Adi Shankar wins the debate. And everyone asked how, because they both are equally scholars and they are giving good perspectives. How do you come to a conclusion that Adi Shankar wins? She says she has been observing the garland of Adi Shankar as well the garland of Mandan Misra. Every day the garland is given to them, it is very fresh, the flowers are fresh. But every time Mandan Misra's garland, the flowers become dry faster than Adi Shankar's. Because he was so rigid about his practice, He was too strong when he was arguing. So much of heat was getting generated in his body. So the flowers, it was getting affected. The flowers were getting affected. Such a wonderful ability to notice. And so she announced that Adi Shankar is a winner. Now, okay, this is a history in our country, and this is a true story. And now I'm not going into what Adi Shankar did, but I'm taking these three perspectives are necessary for us when we are doing a dialogic process. Because one side of us always comes with the perspective, this is how it has to be done, which is the Mandan Misra side in us. All of us carry a Mandan Misra in us. Even dialogic, we may say, this is how a dialogical process has to be done. So this is Mandan Misra side. And another is the Adi Shankar side, where we are dialogical about our own thinking. So that it is dogmatic and dialogic. And the Bharati, though she is a wife of Mandan Misra, is taking into a particular role. And she is able to pertain herself to that role. So this dialogic always has to be within a role of what role I am doing this, particularly in an organization. So these three perspectives we need to carry as we are dialoguing. One is a role, the dogmatic side of us, and the dialogic side of us. Most of the time we are nurturing the dogmatic side and maybe not the dialogic side. But we need to have a culture for that. Though this has been taking a lot of time, but if you see in another perspective in our culture, where the CEO told, we need something in action to Michael, not to step back and reflect. But here is a situation of dialogic in a war atmosphere between Krishna and Arjuna. They are constantly dialoguing between each other in the war zone. And they are approaching each context very differently, planning to approach every context in a very new way, which has not been experimented earlier. And around some 600 to 700 verses, the entire Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between two people in a war zone. So in action, we can also have this dialogical process. If it can be done in a war zone, why not in an organizational setting? Is another question which I carry. These are things to give me conviction of what I am doing in the interdepartmental work. So systemic, you could see many departments coming together. And now I move into a few pictures which I have drawn to show what does and how do I do the organizational development work through interdepartmental coordination. So in our organization, particularly where I work, there is a leadership team, particularly the stakeholders, owners, or the top management people who are the vice presidents or whoever. And then we have employees, and there are many departments connecting these two segments together. And you could see the arrows. There is a two-way arrow, a one-way arrow also. Many times from the leadership, there are certain requests towards the employees, which the employees respond. Sometimes the employees don't respond to the management's idea. Sometimes the employee has some request to the leadership and the leadership does not respond. Similarly, among departments also, there are certain times there is a reciprocation between departments. There are certain times reciprocation does not happen between departments, but still the organization is functioning. It doesn't mean it's not functioning. It's functioning. But what happens is these small gaps where there is no reciprocation happening gets collected over a period of time, and that impinges the organization function together. So we need to have a dialogical space about where these gaps are happening and how they could address that. So then within the department and the leadership area and the employees, now this is a new diagram which I have created. We introduce a dialogical space between the leadership and the employees. And in the dialogical space, you can imagine the departments are also a part of it. I don't want to draw the departments there because then it will become too cluttered, so I will not be able to share that. So it also represents the department, and then we have this dialogical space which is created between the leadership and the employees. Now, in this leadership space, what happens? See, the leadership is more oriented towards vision, to reality, to profit, taking the organization to next level. And from the employee side, certainly there is a behavioral input. They behave in a particular way, the groups behave in a particular way. But it doesn't mean it's only with the leadership. The vision and reality has to be transferred to the employees. And similarly, the employees' struggle also need to be understood by the leadership. So it's a mutual, both-the-way transaction. So in this dialogical process, there are two things which emerge. One side is the reflection side, and other side is the reflectivity side. This is where you need to have some time to step out, step back from the events, and look at it, how we engage together. Particularly here, I use most of the Burns-Schmidt concepts of how reality is constructed, how responsibility is shared, how strategies are shared, how people share their performance, and how leadership is shared. But this is all in a stepping out and looking out the immense events which are happening in the organization. In the reflectivity space, they are stepping in and taking what they reflected in action. Now, as they are working, they are also dialoguing about how a reality is emerging as they are working together, so they can find in the embryo level how a reality is getting constructed. So then that can be brought to the notice of leadership. Maybe leadership is willing to adjust, or the leadership says they want something different. Then again they take it to the reflectivity space, and then they emerge something new, and then that is implemented. Now, in this process of reflection and reflectivity and leadership and employees dialoguing together in that space, the behavior change automatically happens, which was very different from doing a personality test or assessment or various things on the behavioral side, but to create a space for people to dialogue. But this doesn't happen so easily, as I tell, because it seems to be, oh, it's very easy. You just have to introduce a space between them and everything goes well. It's not that way. Many times we have struggled in between, and we are part of the struggle. In a lunch time, we had a conversation. One of my friend who was conversing told, an OD consultant is paid for to go through the struggle. You told me that, yeah. So we are part of the struggle. Though we have initiated interdepartmental coordination, it's only a method. Still, a culture for interdepartmental coordination is not yet evolved in an organization. So it takes time. So many times what happens is, we have initiated, when people come together, they find it very enthusiastic, they think, okay, we are going to do this, they get some tangible result, then slowly their hope withers away, and then it drops. Then we go back again, because I work for 12 months, spread over a year. One day in a month, I work with the organization to build this. 12 sittings. So in the third sitting, they are very happy that things are going well. In the fourth sitting, the dialogical process itself has stopped. Because the leadership was not engaging, or the employees were not able to come together, or so many things surfaced as a Pandora box, they felt not necessary to get in. The old habits are comfortable, so they stopped. And that was a challenge now. I didn't know what to do. Those are the times I used to consult with Burns-Schmidt, and one day I called him and said, I'm really upset now. I don't know what to do. Maybe I'm going to express my anger to them, that I'm very angry that you people are not sustaining something which was going well for you. Then Burn told me, no, you're not supposed to express your anger to the organization people. He told me, maybe you can bring a learning perspective and ask them this question of what motivated them to come together and what is not motivating them to sustain this dialogical process. These were the two simple questions he gave me and said, instead of taking a performing perspective, carry a learning perspective. So that was a different change in the perspective I carried when I was doing this dialogical process when there was a downfall, particularly. So this was a challenging moment when people are experiencing a despair, not confident. Then what happens, since because the leadership is involved, since because the consultant is coming out, somehow they generate a hope and they do it. But then again it falls. Somehow they again generate a hope, then it falls. Until the time that they are willing to give birth to hope through despair. Hope is not an alternative. Hope is born out of despair. When that happens, then there is a steady movement which is happening in the interdepartmental coordination. Till then, we always see a struggle. So now we know how to create a climate so that people will struggle in a very competent way and despair in a competent way. I can tell you one example of how there was a despair and what happened in the leadership area is once a person told me, yes, we are willing to do this interdepartmental coordination, we are doing well. We have very good technical officers who have been trained through this dialogical process, but they keep quitting the work. They keep changing work. And how much we have to develop more people, it's tiring for us. And the leadership did not have an answer. Because if you recruit new people, they are asking more money. And if you pay more money, then the existing employees will start asking for more money. And this is a despair for all of us because we didn't know what to do. Now, when we struggled together, there was an idea which emerged is instead of recruiting technical people, we will train the maintenance engineer with the technical qualities. So for a year, that kind of training was given to the mechanical people with food technology understanding, and now we have solved the problem. So through the despair, some hope emerges. And we need to have a space to hold when people are in despair. And not to bring them out of it, but to be with that space. Maybe we can call it as a creative tension. Hold the tension for a while so that the creativity can emerge through that. So once we pass that, now they know, even though they despair, they know that they have to just come together. And that's becoming part of the culture. So now I'll show you some, maybe. What happens in the interdepartmental coordination is, since people are talking about their experience, and leadership is part of it, and since I'm also part of it as a coach, coaching automatically happens in the dialogical space. Supervision also happens because they are sharing their experience. Peer supervision happens. Leaders ask questions. And there are some places they don't know how to handle situations. Then there is mentoring happening. So all these processes can also happen in the dialogical space. So what were the tangible results? This we did in a dairy industry, where after the interdepartmental coordination, there was an increase of 20% of shelf life of the product. And then in another place, this MBRT shows the shelf life increase. And in one place, another factory where they were making around 250,000 liters per day processing of milk. And then when coordination happened, it went to 350,000 liters, which is almost 33 times more without any addition of manpower or machinery. Just bringing people together. So always we ask the leadership to define what are the core departments and what are the support departments. So we first bring a work with the core departments and then extend that to the support departments. Otherwise, departments are also, many departments are available. We don't know where to start with. So this is another factory where we were working in the tanker holding hours, because these tankers bring the milk collected from the villages, and they have to be sent back so that they can collect more milk, and then this material has to be sent to the market. So there are a lot of things has to be done. So in an ideal situation, it has to be 4.5 hours. A tanker can stay in that place. But you could see it was around 9 hours, 15 minutes, which is almost double. And it needs coordination from various departments, from the collection to the logistics, to the production, to the quality, to the maintenance. All the department has to come together for this project to succeed. So we introduced the dialogical process in May 2014. And slowly, if you see, it started from 8.21 to 8, then it went to 7 hours 48 minutes, 6 hours 10 minutes, 5 hours 23, and 5 hours 40 minutes. And this is sustained for till today, for 2 years. And you see certain places the tanker movements are higher than what it was earlier. And what is the next chart is another factory, their own factory, but in the same campus, where we did not introduce the dialogical process. So it was like a control and an experimental group. Where we did not introduce, there was no change. So that very clearly showed through dialogical process, the company can make a direct benefit, not less. I would say these benefits are huge. Because if you see 1 lakh liter of milk increase in a day, it's a huge process for them. Similarly, saving this gained a very good market for them because they are able to deliver milk on time. And you know, this time in Chennai we had flood. Most of the houses were drowned. We had water running in our roads for 8 feet, 9 feet. And no other dairy industry could supply milk at that point of time. The company where we are working, particularly this interdepartmental coordination is happening, they were able to supply on that day 500,000 liters of milk without any problem. And certainly, we can give credit to how people came together in those two situations. And how did we particularly solve this? Because this is a despair again. How much ever all the departments coordinated together, there are certain pathological testing time which takes 3 hours. So how much ever you coordinate, it's becoming difficult to contain within 4.5 hours to 5 hours. So in the despair, something emerged. There are some people who said, why don't we start testing the quality of the milk at the collection point? So by the time the tanker reaches the factory, we have got the sample result, which saved around 2.5 hours. And the leadership has to install a structure in the collection point for this. So since the leadership is also part of the dialogical process, they were able to invest money and time to that. And then immediately things changed. Now, so interdepartmental process is not just, this is again how the wastage is getting reduced through the interdepartmental coordination. Now with this, I'm going to close because this is the last slide. So what I see as a process is, it's not just building an interdepartmental coordination as a method, it is also a culture for how interdepartmental coordination can happen. And Byrne used to tell, culture breeds culture. Particularly working in a dairy industry, if you take a milk and then put some amount of curd or yogurt, it's like a culture, you put it. And the next day you see the milk has turned to yogurt. And then you take some amount of yogurt and put it in another bowl of milk, the next day that has converted to yogurt. So if you add culture, it breeds culture. Thank you. Yeah, sure. I hope I finished in 30 minutes. So any questions or any reflections? I'm available here. And yeah.
How did you organize the dialogue? Was that off work?
Okay, that's because when we tell organization people about dialogue, they don't understand because it's still a content process. So what we do is, we first introduce this process to the leadership and give an example of how it is for them to feel this dialogical process happening. Then we meet every department head separately, and then we dialogue with them to show how it will work. And then we bring them together. And then we create a dialogue between them. So there is some preparation happens about what it means to be dialoguing. So we give some sample of that. But we start always with one-on-one. And we also ask the leadership people to assure that it's okay for them to express certain things. And no action will be taken against whatever they expressed in the dialogical space. This also gives them a safe container to express.
And was the whole department or was it the whole department with the other whole department or delegates of the department with other delegates?
Yeah, it's a good question. It is the head of the departments first come together. We always invite the first head of the departments, and we also invite the leadership. The leadership comes and shares some example of where they see the interdepartmental coordination is happening well, and what are the examples where they see the interdepartmental coordination could be better. So the context is always set by the leaders, so that they take responsibility in a way. So we ask them to set a context, and once the head of the departments are brought together, and we find that they are doing well in the dialogical process, sometimes people say, we just take 20 minutes every day to dialogue. What they dialogue? They just dialogue on two questions. What went well yesterday? What did not go well yesterday? That is all it is. Just these two questions. What did not go well today? They all see how they can do something different at that point of time. That is all they do. Once the HODs have done, then we invite people who are reporting to them. That will be the second level. And then when we have done with that layer, then we go to the next layer. So 3 layers of people working in departments are brought into this culture. Once we do it for 3 layers, we see it is very sustainable over a period of a year. Yes, ma'am.
Can you mix dialogue groups? Leadership and people working together, can you mix it also?
Yes, sometimes yes.
To speed it up, the process? Okay.
Yes.
And another question, what are the core departments?
Just a minute. I'll keep the picture there so that... the core departments are... If you see, the leadership is always within the dialogical space, and the core departments are defined by the leadership. Because we will not know as external consultants what are the core departments. So they define it. And sometimes, I also call this as primary space and periphery space. Sometimes the core departments have to be in the primary space. Sometimes the support department has to come to the primary space and the core departments have to go to the periphery. So this exchange also needs to happen, and only leadership can define at what moment they have to come to the primary space and what moment they have to come to the secondary space. So it is always in engagement with the leadership.
It depends on the issue.
Depends on the focus. Yeah, the issue.
I just wanted to ask who contacted you first, being a coach or from this organization.
I would say no one contacted. We only contacted them. We are almost selling this idea to people because nobody is knowing what to be contacted for. And no one knows what this means to them. So it's very difficult for us, particularly when I went and spoke to them about how a culture can be developed. People were having a different phase and they say, if you bring a new culture, then how it will be? We don't know that. And for them, it's very threatening and they feel very insecure when you say that something can be done with the culture. So then I learned to somehow get some examples from them. Like how I got between the quality, marketing, and production. They say, this is what we want. So somehow we need to make them get into their reality and see how they can dialogue, and then they are willing to do. So what we do now is maybe we give a presentation like this for an hour, and sometimes I have given them a half a day to sample on how the dialogic can happen. And they can choose whether they want to work with us. Another option we give them is, we tell them that we work for 12 sittings in a year, and they can always choose after every 2 sittings whether they want to continue this or not. So that also gives them a liberty to experiment with us. So this is how we have been working.
Can you just elaborate a bit more on the sittings? So for me, this looks great, but I still have a bit of lack of imagination. How many people are involved in this? Are you organizing? You have different. Are these really different rooms physically? Are you alone? So just a bit.
Sure.
Beef on it.
Usually, it starts with maybe. Usually, the leadership, maybe in my experience, has been starting with one person, maybe for an hour. Then I work with 5 people together, who are the core departments, 5 departments. And then we expand it. So at a time, we work with in a range between 1 to 15, but in different intervals. Sometimes it is just one-on-one, and sometimes it is bringing people together. It depends on the context how we do that. And particularly, what we found as a difficulty when we were introducing this process is, in one factory we got a good result. And then we thought this is going to work everywhere. And then we implemented in another factory. We just got dumped. It didn't work well. The reason was, I was in a hurry thinking that, okay, it worked there, it will work here. So then I realized that every moment I need to be non-dual. So then what we do is now, even though the first layer HOD we finish, again we start the same process from the alphabet A, B, C with the second layer. We don't take for granted that the first layer got a success and now the second layer we will get a success. No, it is not happening. So we have to be beginners many times. That's how it works. And if it doesn't work, and that's a good time to dialogue too.
Can you tell us a bit about the background structure of the companies? Because India is very much different, as I experienced in the first layer, like what means hierarchy, what is the relation between employees and managers. Because for me, I have very often like agile organizations in my mind, or what is going on, what is changing. So can you point out a bit how in India is the structure of companies and these relationship between managers and employees?
Yeah. Again, I am seeing this is different between different industries, particularly. If you get into more of a manufacturing company, then I could see more of an hierarchical position. If it is a service industry, the leadership is much more easy. Like, for example, in a hotel industry or even in an aircraft industry, they are much more free. If it comes to software companies, though they seem to say that we are flat organization, but they are very rigid to influence. That's my experience. Because they think every solution can be made through their technical expertise. They think dialogic is irrelevant. Why should we do? Because we are experts in whatever we are doing. So it's very, yeah? Okay. So what happens is we have to go context by context, particularly if in a manufacturing industry. Inviting leaders into the dialogical space helps in the beginning itself. Whereas in a software industry, the reverse happens. Instead of bringing the leaders inside, I bring first I'm inviting them to dialogue on what they are going through as the second level leaders. And then now you bring the leaders from the above, then there is a balance. So we need to strategize based on what we experience in that company. But what I'm seeing as a maybe what fits in the organization. Have I answered your question? I'm not sure. Have I answered? Well, then I should stop here. Because sometimes what happens is the door is open, but then we try to keep opening more and more. If the door is open, it's good to check whether it's open or not. Yeah.
Did you also work on changing the mindsets
Yes.
of the leaders and also on social competencies?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I heard someone was saying about that. I think you said about being human in organization. Yeah. Certainly the leadership mindset has changed in this process, because when they hear to people's problem, maybe I would like to demonstrate through one small piece. This is okay. I'm taking this paper. Now what happens is, I'm going to, like this, tear it. And in one pull, this has to become 3 pieces. Okay? Because it's already torn in 2 sides. Yeah? Is there anyone willing to take this? And just in one pull, it has to become 3. Just experiment. Yeah, okay, thank you. Because the experimentation is the first part of whatever way you want, but it has to become 3 pieces. No, this way. Oh. The condition is set. Yeah. Okay, even if you do the other way, where you said, yeah, you can do that also. Let us see that. Why apply a condition? Even then it doesn't happen. Now, what I see is the leaders are with this perspective. They say, now I have given this, you produce this. They don't understand it doesn't come so easily. For that, the leaders have to step into the space of the employees. Unless they step in, they will not realize this. So, if we tell them that you have to step in, they don't. But if you tell them to come and share about their examples where they find difficulties, they are willing to come there. And then now you say, okay, now the other people have heard your difficulties. Maybe will it be a good chance for you to listen to them? And once they start listening, then they know that it doesn't come so easily. And then there is a mindset change. One of the vice presidents of the organizations told me, if I knew this 30 years back, I would have been very different as a manager. So that's how the mindset changes. And today I see, earlier the management of that organization was telling, okay, let's experiment in one factory. But now they are saying, wherever the factory they are initiating, they are saying, first you go and do this process. So that's a big mindset change. And managers, instead of blaming each other, they sit in dialogue. So that is another mindset change. It happens, and I think it's a power of people coming together. And that's where I see individual perspective. Perspective builds the individual experience. Dialogic creates the social experience. So through dialogic, when people have to adjust, their personality changes. So Burns' definition of roles is, your essence of your personality is exhibited through your roles. So when you are competently changing and playing your role differently, then the personality also changes. That's where the mindset also changes. Certainly, yes. But in this process change, I would like to say one, I don't know, maybe this is one thing which I will say, and then if there's a question I take, otherwise I don't know whether the time is permissible for this. Particularly when you say change, it's a very big word. Because we need to even question what do we mean by that. When I said about assumptions, like for example, from the young age, I've been hearing the story, fox and grapes. I don't know how many of you here in this culture. The fox, it wants to eat grapes because it's hungry. So it goes in search of grapes. It tries to get it, but the grapes is high. It is not able to take. At one point, the fox says, these grapes are sour. They are bad taste. And it moves. So the story in our country is, the fox did not try enough, so it is blaming the circumstances. That was a moral given to us. but we seldom question, do fox eat grapes? So many times we just assume things and then we build on that assumption without even questioning whether that assumption is right or wrong. So we need to even reason out this assumption. That is where it becomes movement from the dogmatic to the dialogical process. And this change is very interesting, particularly with the Burns concept. I would like to connect the changes. 4 levels of reality which we see about reality construction itself in an organization. 1, change as a data. What I mean as a change and what you mean as a change has to be the same, which is the shared perception which happens through the dialogue. Okay, now we are in the common meaning of change. But if you see the next level of reality for change, we need to have solution, but it depends on various interdependencies, because one person in an organization is not able to change. So again, we have to now give a data of what do we mean by change and how the person is constructing meaning based on the change, so that the interdependencies are having a common shared reality. That is where I talked about in the reflection space, where they create a common shared reality. Then we move to the change of how do we build responsibility and competence for that. So that's the 4th level. Usually what organizations do is they want to go to the 4th level, skipping the first 3 levels. And it doesn't work. So our work is to bring them to that space to say, first we need to share our reality. Because many times when organizations say, we want to go there, first we ask them where you are. And one person can tell this is where we are, because in an organization, it's a system of many departments coming together. So then a group of people have to tell where they are. And when you invite the dialogue, where they are is so much of mismatch. So then we match through dialoguing. Yeah? Any other question? Or it's interesting, I was looking at Bern to ask, have I done well? It's nice to stand before your teacher to share your experience. Thanks, Bern.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.